This is Jocko Podcast number 100 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
And we have a guest with us tonight who is in large part responsible for this podcast existing in the first place, who has provided massive support behind pretty much everything I've done, including books and podcasts and events and all this other stuff that I've been getting after for the last couple of years since I departed the shadows and stepped into the normal world. In fact, this is the person that pulled me from the shadows into the normal world, Mr. Tim Ferriss. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jocko.
And we have you in an interesting state right now.
You do.
Because you just got done with a 10-day silent retreat and a 5-day fast embedded in there somewhere, right?
I did. So it was my first 10-day.
You know what my notes were in here after I said that? My notes are dude ? Like dude. Because that's what that makes me think. Just like dude. Okay, tell us about it a little bit. I know you'll probably cover it in depth later. It
was in retrospect probably layering a few too many things on top of one another, but it was my first meditation retreat, also my first silent retreat combined, and consisted of 10 days of waking up at 5:30 and
I support that part.
beginning, I know it's sleeping in, but starting at 5:30. Hadn't woken up with the stars in a while, and then sitting for 45 minutes of meditation, walking for 45 minutes of meditation, and doing that until 9 p.m. with the exception of meals. But as you mentioned, I fasted for the first 5 days out of 10 because I wanted to see how that affected my state. And I sat during meals effectively, meaning meditated during those times as well. And it was an unexpectedly intense experience because it unlayers your psyche in a fashion that I hadn't experienced before. Since you have no distractions, you're not permitted to read, there's no music, there's no talking, you're discouraged from any writing, there are no devices, and that means there's no real escape from whatever is ricocheting inside your own head. And as you go through the passing days, you drop into deeper layers of your personality and the stories that you've constructed for yourself, as well as direct experience and memories that you haven't thought of. And in my case, 20, 25 years, 30 years, 35 years in some cases, these very vivid, intense memories that come back. And so people have a very difficult time at points, and the teachers are there every other day to interact on a one-on-one basis to ensure that people don't have a complete psychotic break, I suppose.
Did you hear, random question, but would you hear people like crying in their rooms or whatever?
Heard people crying, definitely heard people crying. People went through a lot of pain, and there were sublime experiences as well, in moments of deep clarity or alleviation of suffering. But I think that, and I was actually just looking forward to describing the experience to our mutual friend, Dr. Peter Attia, who may be the most like cerebral, intense, impatient, analytical person I've ever met, to a degree that even I find hilarious, which is difficult to achieve in this world, in this life. And his level of obsession and perseverating on concepts endlessly makes me want to do a second retreat with Peter when he's not allowed to tell me how he's feeling, because I think the more you have run your life through your prefrontal cortex, the harder you fall. And I would not recommend it for most people.
Really?
Because I would have left the retreat 3 or 4 times probably, were it not for one particular teacher who had decades of experience with tens of thousands of retreatants, because I felt like I was going to leave in worse shape than I came in, that I had regressed to a very reactive emotional state, and that it was going to be a huge handicap when I left. I felt like I was regressing tremendously, and he was able to right the ship a little bit along the way. But if he had not been there and I had left, even on day 9, I remember I was like, people are supposed to be in this deep state of bliss, or at least that was my perception. I feel like I've just been rubbed raw, and all these nerves that I've numbed from difficult experiences in childhood and so on have just been exposed to the surface. So I think it requires a high level of supervision, and this may not be the forum for discussing what I'm about to say, but for those people who have the experience, it might make some sense. It had the characteristics of a very strong psychedelic experience, but laid out over 10 days where there's no escape. So instead of ripping off the Band-Aid, you are being exposed to facets of your life and character that perhaps you have not faced in decades. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a fun 10 days.
We get when you get sleep deprivation, which I've gone through some significant sleep deprivation. You have those kind of you take a trip without leaving the farm type situations, and for me it was nothing crazy or anything. I remember seeing stop signs in the ocean and traffic lights in the ocean and stuff like that.
That's not crazy.
Well, okay, crazy, but it wasn't some psychological sort of unpacking where I was meeting my former self or anything like that. But yeah, you definitely, that's when I hear, cause I've never tried psychedelic drugs, and when people talk about them, to me, it does not sound fun to me, because I think that where I would end up would not be a happy place. Yeah. And I don't really need to hang out there very much.
And I should also say that I don't, in the case of the silent retreat or in the case of psychedelics, do it for fun. And I've had a few people ask me, did you enjoy your experience? I had a few staffers afterwards. They're like, oh, did you enjoy your retreat? And I'm like, I found it valuable. I wouldn't use the word enjoy.
Yeah. Well, you obviously are going to unpack this thing, and I'm sure you'll do awesome episode talking about it as you look back on it right now. Your brain is...
It's still 70% there. And they told us at the end, which I thought was very appropriate because it applies to so many things. They said, or one of the teachers said, you think you're normal right now and you're not. You're very hypersensitive. Your retreat is half done. So it'll take 10 days, the equivalent amount of time to reintegrate and get retethered. And I remember thinking to myself, I have a fucking book launch coming. I don't have 10 days to gingerly walk my way back to reality. But nonetheless, that's true for so much, right? I mean, it's if you have a book and your book is 90% done. I remember I told a more seasoned writer when I was writing my second book, I said, I'm 90% done. They said, oh, congratulations, you only have 50% left.
Yeah, it's the trim work. It's just like building a house. It's the trim work, all that little stuff that takes longer than you think it's going to take. Well, so to just set the stage a little bit, number one, you were on this podcast before, which was an awesome episode, and you talked about some of your hard experiences growing up and going through college and actually having suicidal thoughts and beyond that, suicidal plans. That was podcast number 50, and it really helped out a lot of people. I got an immense amount of great feedback from people, and so thank you for doing that.